As we endure this global pandemic, many of our games have transitioned to the internet. Unfortunately, this is far from a seamless process. While online games do provide some conveniences you would not otherwise have, music players, digital visuals, large scrolling maps, it also introduces plenty of obstacles. I've run many online and in-person games, and the difference between both running and preparing them can be truly staggering. So if you're among the many who are now gaming online, here are some ways to smooth that transition. Pick a virtual tabletop and stick with it. There are a lot of different virtual tabletops out there. They all do more or less the same thing with minor feature differences. Give you a virtual visual space to mimic the table you'd normally see in your game. They do this to varying degrees of success, but it really depends on what you're looking for. The one I'd recommend, if you're new to this, is Roll20. There are a lot of good ones out there like Fantasy Grounds or Tabletop Simulator, but Roll20 has 3 key advantages. You don't need to buy it. It's completely free. You can buy art packs and rule compendiums that hook up directly into it, and it's been around forever, so there is a lot of support for it. This makes the barrier to entry very low. There are a million tutorial videos out there. Your players can get immediately into it by just creating an account, and you can import rules directly into it. So if you're playing D&D, you can even drag and drop monsters from the monster manual. But of course, shop around and see which one suits you. But once you pick one, stick with it. Virtual tabletops are like any other complex software product. You'll get better the more you use it. You can be Picasso, but if you pick up Photoshop for the first time, you will be shit at it. And if you hop around from Photoshop to GIMP to Paint.net, you're only going to make it harder on yourself. Learn one, get comfortable, and then, if you've got the itch, make a switch. Prepare everything in advance. You have a rich, elaborate city the players are navigating. You know what the players are interested in, and you have a few encounters planned for them. You also know that the players might do a bit of shopping, so you've planned out various stores they can go to. And then, some of your players say, "We're gonna go rob the bank." What? You don't know what the banks look like. Why would you need to know that? Are they insane? Should you just end their lives like the miserable cretins they are? You take a deep breath. Okay, you got this. You just have to draw up a quick map and figure out what the size of the bank would be, what banks are closest. Then you just have to figure out the security systems they would have and who would be there at that time, and oh shit, you're playing online. Just drawing the map alone would take a while. And you need a map if they're going to go on a heist. And who has the time to draft spare sheets for the police? So take it from me, prepare everything. I know, it sucks, but this doesn't mean you have to have everything mapped out. It just means you need to have backups, backup maps, backup stat blocks, backup NPCs, you name it. Because when a player surprises you online, you don't have the time to draft up some spare resources on the fly. Most resources need to be put into the computer so the online tabletop knows you're using it. Oh, you say, hey, we can just do theater of the mind like we did in person. That works when you can see each other face to face, but good luck holding a player's attention while they stare blankly at an empty screen, hearing a disembodied voice describe a scene without visuals. But, you say, I can just roll in person and only use a virtual tabletop when I need to draw on it. Sure, but as you rifle through papers in person or roll dice no one can see while your players are sitting in front of a computer screen, don't be surprised if they're perusing Facebook while they wait. Trust me, prepare as much as you can. Use whatever you find. Okay, obviously preparing everything is exhausting. Thankfully, you don't have to. There are tons of resources out there, spare maps, homebrew stat blocks, even entire plots. Use it. In an in-person game, this can feel somewhat scummy. After all, some of the fun of GMing is creating your own stuff. Believe me, I know. Every campaign I've ever ran is homebrew. But for an online game, you need to get past this. Preparing maps and other resources for an online game is that much more difficult because you need to put it in a shared space online and you can't adjust it on the fly. Taking what you find is a practical necessity. Personally, I prefer to buy map packs, rulebooks, and tokens when I can. At least on Roll20, this gives me a plethora of resources that I can whip up on the fly. I may not have expected you to rob a bank, but a couple of my many map packs I've bought have a bank mapped out. The rulebook I've bought has a few spare gunmen and investigator stat blocks I can use, and I've gotten many security officers in my token packs that I can repurpose as bank guards. If you're on a budget, there are some other ways you can get resources. R-Battle Maps has a lot of good free maps. You can use Token Tool from RP Tools to make tokens out of any picture. Pinterest is also surprisingly useful in that front. And lastly, some virtual tabletops provide basic rules for popular role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder because they've got extensive SRDs. I'll put links to these resources and others in the description. It's also where you can find my Patreon so you can get more content like this. So please help me out. Role-playing games are always a labor of love. We do this without being paid because the joy we experience of crafting a narrative together is indescribable. The memories you forge stand up with the great myths of yore. That takes time and patience. Whether you're playing in person or online, remind yourself of that. We do this out of love. No one forces us to sit down at the table or in front of your computer. As long as you remember that, your game online will be as successful as your game offline. Take time to do what you need to do to make it work. And trust yourself.